Hi pals, I'm Kate and welcome back to a new video. Today we're going to be talking about the books on my history TBR that I most want to get to. First up is The Eagle and the Heart by Helen Castor. Helen Castor is one of my favourite historians and I have wanted to read this book for about a year. This is an account of the reigns of Richard II and Henry IV, so that is late 14th to early 15th century if I remember correctly. That is one of my favourite periods of English history to read about. We have Richard II, who is very flamboyant. He gets deposed by Henry Bolingbroke, his cousin, who then becomes Henry IV. We first heard Helen Castor talk about this on a bonus episode of The Rest is History, one of my favourite podcasts. I first mentioned on this channel that I want to get to The Eagle and the Heart when I was reading a novel called The Corner That Held Them by Sylvia Townsend Warner. That's a historical fiction novel set in a 14th century convent, written in like the mid 20th century. That's how long I have been meaning to get to this. One of the things that I've noticed from having this channel, which I love, is that I'm not reading as much history as I normally do or as I would like to. I spoke about recently in a video about like reading regrets that I think of reading history and having it as a basis to reading fiction is very important. I have noticed that I've been slacking off a little bit, so this video is kind of like a course correction for me to refocus my energy on some of these books that I really want to get to. Earlier this year I also watched The Hollow Crown, which is the BBC adaptations of Shakespeare's Henriade and the War of the Roses cycle. I adored that, and this period in history was also covered in that. So I really feel like a lot of my reading and watching this year has been leading me to read this book. I have this out from the library currently. I don't know if I will finish this by the time it's due back, so I may well end up having to buy it, but that is our first one, and that is probably the biggest priority for the year. Next up is a history book on post-war Britain, and that is State of Emergency Britain from 1970 to 1974 by Dominic Sambrook. Because of The Rest is History, Dominic Sambrook has become one of my favourite historians. I'll be honest, Britain in the 1970s isn't really a topic that would usually interest me. In terms of history, I really love Regency, Victorian, First World War and Second World War, post-war, probably up to the 50s. So this one will be a little bit of a change for me. However, I did listen to the Rest is History series on Britain in 1974 and I absolutely loved it. I thought it's one of the best series they've ever done, and so I thought, why not take myself out of my comfort zone. I think that this is the third book in his post-war Britain series of books. I don't really want to go to the 60s one. I'm especially interested in the 1970s. This is a social history, but I think it's also written as narrative history, which I find makes topics much more approachable. The reason why I haven't yet picked this one up is because this covers 4 years of British history and is 800 pages long, so it's a bit of a beast, this one, but I have it on my Kobo waiting for me. And I would love to potentially get to this one in the new year. This is a social history, like I said, but it covers the Edward Heath and Harold Wilson governments and the state of emergency in the 70s, think strikes and the 3-day week, etc. I'll be very proud of myself when I finish this one, so that is on the list, and I think probably will be one that I get to in the new year. Think like deep winter history reading. Right, next up is High Minds, The Victorians and the Birth of Modern Britain by Simon Heffer. I have this one on my Kobo. I did used to have a physical copy of this, but it looks like I lost it in my house move. I think during my house move, I just lost a random box of books, which is kind of annoying. This must have been one of them. This is very apt as it is currently Victober or the end of October as this goes live. And I have had one of the best reading months that I've had in quite a long time. I haven't just been reading Victorian fiction, I've been reading other stuff alongside it, but it's reminded me that I do really want to brush up on my Victorian history. This book is obviously all about the Victorian age, but it's also specifically about the Victorian mind. And I find the way Victorians think absolutely fascinating, especially towards the latter half of the Victorian period, because they're so full of confidence and energy and this profound sense of right. This has been on my TBR for about 2 years, and much like State of Emergency, I have been putting it off because it's around 1,200 pages, so it is a big one. High Minds primarily focuses on the group of thinkers who radically changed Victorian Britain, so politicians like William Gladstone and my favourite Prime Minister, Benjamin Disraeli. Philanthropists, writers, I think Samuel Butler is in here quite a lot as an example. That group of thinkers who fundamentally changed the country over the course of quite a short period of time. I've heard great things about this, that's why I picked it up originally, and I know he also has a book, I think, on Edwardian history that I would love to get to once I've finished this one. Next up is Heiresses, The Lives of $1 Million Babies by Laura Thompson. Laura Thompson is one of my favourite literary biographers. She's done the best biography on the Mitford sisters that I've read, called Take 6 Girls. She's also done a biography on Agatha Christie, which I'm currently reading and thoroughly enjoying. I follow her on Substack, and she mentioned this book in one of her posts about like negative reviews she'd received on the book, and it made me want to read it so much. I think that this is quite a sweeping history of the heiress from the 17th century, and I believe it goes right up to the 21st century. I'm always really interested in how marriage in 17th, 18th, 19th century essentially means that women lose the right to access their own fortunes and their own property. In the Substack post, she also mentioned heiress snatching, which I think will be really interesting to read about. There is an American heiress who becomes the Duchess of Marlborough, and then her fortune helps stabilise the Blenheim estate. This just sounds like so up my street. I can't wait to get to this one, and I've had nothing but good experience with Laura Thompson in the past, so I really trust her. Right, next up is Andrew Roberts' biography of Winston Churchill. I'm currently reading The Gathering Storm, which is the first volume of Winston Churchill's 6-volume history of the Second World War. I have been reading that for what feels like forever. They're very long, but I am thoroughly enjoying it. And although I knew Winston Churchill won the Nobel Prize for Literature for those works, it still like astonishes me like just how well he can write. But back to this one, I've had this on my TBR waiting for me to kind of finish The Gathering Storm. Andrew Roberts is one of my favourite historians. He wrote a history of the Second World War called The Storm of War, which I really rate and always recommend to people. He's also done a biography of Napoleon that I would love to read. I've heard him speak kind of in depth on Churchill. I'd say he's probably the most eminent kind of Churchill historian we currently have. I also think he is very even-handed about Winston Churchill's successes and his mistakes. This again is quite a big one, so it'll take me a fair while to get through. Right, last up is The Sleepwalkers by Christopher Clark. This is his account of the causes of the First World War. Also quite lengthy. This is one of the foundational history texts now of the First World War, and I haven't read it, and it just sounds fantastic, and I really do feel like I'm missing out with gaps in my knowledge because I haven't read this. Edwardian Britain to the First World War is one of my favourite periods of history. It's one of my favourite periods to read novels from. It's the last book. I would love to hear from you in the comments if you've read any of these or if you have any other recommendations based on these. I always love to hear from you. It makes my day, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!